Now it's my special honor to introduce our lunch keynote speaker, Dr. Howard Liu, someone who has been both a generous mentor and inspiration to me and countless others. So many of you may already know him for his leadership and contributions in psychiatry and medical education, but I'd like to take very briefly a moment to highlight a few qualities that stand out, both professionally and personally. Dr. Liu is a psychiatrist, educator, workforce expert, social media innovator, and a passionate advocate for medical student and trainee well-being. He is the chair of the Department of Psychiatry at the University of Nebraska Medical Center and a tenured professor at their College of Medicine. Over the years, Dr. Liu has been a prolific voice in psychiatric education with over 100 peer-reviewed abstracts and frequent invitations to speak both nationally and internationally on topics spanning mental health, medical education, and the responsible use of social media. His leadership extends beyond his institution. He is also co-chair of the World Psychiatric Association's Interest Group on Medical Students. He has served as the American Psychiatric Association's Council on Communications and is past president of the Association of Directors of Medical Student Education and Psychiatry. And in 2025, earlier this year, he was inducted as a fellow of the American College of Psychiatrists, an honor recognizing his sustained contributions to the field. And personally, I know that he is a devoted father, and I personally know Howard to be someone who was so deeply generous of his time, deeply invested in mentoring the next generation of providers, and always willing to offer his support. I am grateful to him, and I know countless others are grateful to him as a mentor and role model. So please join me in welcoming Dr. Howard Liu.
Thanks so much to Dr. Chen for that very generous introduction. And I just want to also acknowledge just the power of this session. This has been such a powerful 2 days. And Dr. Lily Chen deserves just another round of applause for outstanding vision. Well done. I also want to acknowledge having just attended the wonderful youth session that Dr. Juliana Chen, Dr. Mary Shen, and several of you served on as well, that she made a comment about the power of active listening, and that is a healing piece in itself. I will note that during lunchtime, however, I'm going to relieve you of that need to be actively listening, because I also want you to make sure that you eat, find people to talk to, connect as well. So this will be more of a casual dialogue as well. The other thing I'll just say is that although we are all kind of moving along together in social media, none of us are truly experts. The powerful work of the Asian American Foundation showing that youth are indeed on social media, it's true, but none of us in this room probably feel equipped to say we are experts in it. We are learning together. And as Dr. Justin Chen said a little bit earlier today on a panel, I do feel like the answers are in this room together. We're going to kind of bumble through it together, because things are changing every week if you read the headlines, and we really need to learn from each other. So as I mentioned, happy to be here. I have a little bit of a consulting role with the device manufacturer, just a couple of meals worked on for a piece. And I do want to acknowledge that I am also Lucille Liu's dad as well. And we do not represent the full Asian American Pacific Islander population in Nebraska, but fairly close. Technically, it's 3%, but I'll do my best not to reference her and embarrass her during my talk. I also want to say that coming to this conference has been a several-year process, and many of us that have been here formerly were involved with the Clinical Scholars Project. And really, it's been wonderful to see all the seeds of that come together in this WAVES meeting here. I bumped into Dr. Chen, both Dr. Chens, Justin and Lily in New York. I saw Dr. Juliana Chen, Dr. Mary Shen, who facilitated the last panel in Boston. And just you see all of these alumni who are inspired by a culture of health working together in so many communities. We heard about Boston, we heard about North Carolina, I'll say a little about Nebraska, but all across the US, you see all these people coming together and really creating that culture, and that for me is inspiring. And one of the enduring pieces, even as programs end, is just seeing that community come together. So again, lunchtime plenary, so just a couple things. If you walk away with one thing, know that, of course, we know that there are some risks, and that is not a surprise for folks, about social media. I'll try to highlight some recent headlines just the last couple weeks, just to keep us all up to date about what's out there, although many of them may not be surprising to you. The second thing is just what's one tool that we can put away. I've written down so many things from this morning. I've been trying to tweet out some of the things that I've really found profound from the panelists here. And I think it's always a learning experience. But what can we take from this conversation today, whether we're a clinician, whether we're a parent, or a youth member ourselves? I'll start also by acknowledging another member of my family who's not here, our youngest child, who's a fourth grader. And, as I think about social media and I think about risk, I'm going to tell you a story about gardening. So this is my fourth grader. He decided he was going to start a garden and on his own. So he kind of planted these seeds into these plastic cups and just put them out there, right? And then one day, there was this terrible thunderstorm, and the cups all got knocked over. And we thought, well, that's the end of the cucumber crop, right? But as it turns out, not so, because they flourished in this rock bed right next to the intended garden. And the cucumbers ended up growing. It's a very sort of biblical story, I know. But so this piece about the rocky soil, actually true. We've harvested 10 or 12, when we say we, I mean he, harvested 10 or 12 full-size cucumbers from this patch. But also, I think it's a metaphor for thinking about our youth, right? As a parent of 4, child psychiatrist, it's a hard job out there. We all know it, right? Everyone's been parenting, and also there are all sorts of folks that are taking care of kids these days, right? Grandparents, foster parents, older siblings, guardians. We heard from several of our refugee first-generation colleagues earlier today just about having to take on that parenting role, navigating together. It's a hard job. So we often try to create these super safe spaces for medically sealed, like these cups that my son is trying to plant these cucumbers in. But, lo and behold, they didn't really flourish there. They really needed deeper soil. They needed to find something. And a successful parent, guardian, grandparent, whoever's raising the kids, sibling, knows that at some point you got to tip it over, right? See the real world, and then see how things go. And that really is managing risk. And I think that's the approach we want to take when we think about social media, AI, and all these new forces that are out there just beneath the surface. So we'll talk about these areas. I think the landscape is that most of us are not using social media professionally. I was talking to the great Vic Armstrong over there. Can I give him a round of applause for being an outstanding force on social media for good? There's not many of us left. We were just lamenting on X, for example. Not many of us, because most people use it for fun. And when it's not fun, most people get off, right? But, that's the way we learn, and we need voices. The Asian American Foundation report showed that, right? A lot of youth are on social media, and they're on all the time, right? Many of you right now may be on social media, right? And that is a good thing, because that's where we're learning things. That's where many of us get our news, and certainly for our kids and teens as well. But what are they getting exactly? And how do we make sure there's also some good evidence-based resources for them, some supportive spaces? I think there's discussion about peers as well, people learning from peers. That is really important for us to learn and find these safe spaces, and even to create them specific to the Asian American communities that we represent all around the country and even across the world as well. One book, in case you are a reader, I've become an Audible reader only because of different duties. But when I drive or wash dishes or fold laundry, I'm usually listening to a book. And one that I might recommend you consider reading is by the former head of sort of policy for Facebook, who then wrote this expose. It's striking because what it really outlines are a lot of known policy failures that really were taken on for a profit motive rather than thinking about the safety of our youth, right? And so there's several elected officials that opened our conference today, right? Several folks that are policy experts in the crowd today. Some of the solutions we're going to need to consider are not just individual solutions, right? Mostly to date, we have asked social media platforms to govern themselves, right? And assuming that they'll do the right thing. But that's not always been the case, and we'll kind of look at the headlines here. So raise your hand if you've ever heard of Roblox. Anyone here know Roblox? So it turns out that it is one of the most visited sites for youth, especially tweens and younger, around the world. About 40% of their traffic, of 80 million or so, are kids 12 and under, right? And so you would think that such a robust, platform would have very deep safeguards for youth. But in fact, there are several cases, including a state attorney general. I think Kansas just filed a lawsuit as well, and just about concerns about are we in fact safeguarding or not because of recent concerns about child predators coming on, basically using voice impersonating software to sound like they're a youth, and then systematically grooming, and then doing what's called sextortion, where they get them to send a compromising photo and then use that to leverage more behaviors being prevalent online. So that is something that we always hear about for decades. Think about those predators around the corner and so on. But you don't think about that when you're having your child log into software because you're busy on a call or working from home, or you're traveling and you're just trying to soothe them or something like that. Who are they talking to on Roblox, right? When they're on Discord, who are their friends, right? Who are those people they're hanging out with? They're not always who you think, right? And so some of that dialogue is, well, whose responsibility is that to ensure that? Is it the platform? Is it the parent? Is it the government? So something to think about. Long-standing, we've had some discussions. Some of that popped up today as well, just about body image. We know from metadata, Meta's both Instagram and Facebook parent company, that some leaked data from a whistleblower also showed that there are impacts on adolescents and thinking about their body image, which can, in fact, lead to disordered eating as well. And so that's a risk factor, right? You're looking at sort of doctored photos that look unusually thin, other things that are sort of changed through filters and so on. And then you start to think, well, when I look in the mirror, that's not how I look. Maybe I need to do something different. Maybe I need to skip a few meals. Maybe I need to start purging. Maybe I need some of the things like that. And so that's one of those pieces that started some of the state attorney general class action lawsuits against Meta, and they've also gone to other platforms as well. I just had a grand rounds in my department last 2 weeks from the chair of psychiatry in Indiana, and she was just talking about Snapchat, which not something I've been thinking about much recently, but I looked into it, and there's a lot of drug use and drug dissemination on Snapchat. So this example is also Instagram, but basically you don't need to go to some street corner anymore for an exchange. You can just order the pills online, right? And the concern is you don't know what those pills are, and several have been laced with fentanyl. And the terrible thing is a lot of people discover this when their child has accidentally overdosed. So this is just something to be knowledgeable about as well, another risk factor out there. And as you see, the pattern is we discover these things, and then the state attorney generals tend to get a lawsuit in our family members, but it's after the fact, after the damage has been done. So just thinking proactively, are you aware of this? Something else which trends, if you have a teenager, you might be asked them about this, are school fights. And you think, well, that might be local, but it's not local anymore. These are now trending internationally. And so you have people live streaming, planning, a fight or a brawl, and it breaks out. And this child or teen who is targeted, they might then be humiliated, not just in front of their classmates, but by millions of viewers around the world who then share it and share it and share it. And even though you might try as the principal or the parent of the child to, take action against the individuals involved in that school, it's gone viral, right? So this has been documented as an ongoing phenomena. And unfortunately, several children have been seriously injured, and some have died. And some have died because of the injuries. Some have died due to suicide afterwards. So it is something that's not to just be considered playground bullying. It's pretty serious. Another piece, which is just hot off the presses, is that we know AI is a powerful force, can do many things that are making our lives simpler. Unfortunately, one of the things it also does is take a normal photo that you might post, on social media, or your yearbook photo in school, and you can now feed it into software which would then generate a very realistic nude photograph or video of that individual. And that can be secondarily traumatizing if it's shared, right? And so that has become so prevalent that states have started to battle it. But the problem is state by state, it's a patchwork. So you move, from one school, another state, whatever. And there's different kind of statutes that govern that. So finally, there's been bipartisan support to try to move towards this. And so now there's a newly signed and, approved by both houses and signed by the president, act to take it down, which does require this action, which is actually one positive thing. Of course, that's sort of like whack-a-mole, though. You see one thing, you try to take it down, and then another. And so many victims will spend years and years chasing after these pieces because, they're out there. And you can't always, the law enforcement resources to find the original perpetrators, not always present. Newest thing, too, on AI is that there are really tragic stories about chatbots. So it turns out that many folks are using AI artificial companions just for fun, right? In the teen population, tween population, even kids. And this question is, are the safeguards built in? And there have been several stories now, I think, of the third potential suicide related to conversations with an AI chatbot. This is a 13-year-old honor student, Juliana, who, parents unfortunately found deceased, and then they had to reproduce what happened. And it turns out that she had been actively corresponding with a chatbot. And the question is, what are these chatbots designed to do? Are they designed to activate a Dr. Justin Chen or Dr. Juliana Chen, an expert, right, in the field if something goes wrong? Or are they designed to reassure you to keep coming back to the chatbot, right? And they will be your friend. Nobody else understands, but I'll be there for you anytime, right? And here's just a transcript piece that I think this is the Washington Post just pulled from that chatbot conversation that because the parents are suing the manufacturer. But as you can see, a real cry for help there, right? Where most of us would say, whoa, it's time to, really bring this to a professional, right? But, perhaps the response was not quite what we wanted, right? And the algorithm there did not bring someone to a live, therapist or something like that. And unfortunately, eventually, the parents did find that she seemed to be depressed, did schedule to see a therapist, and then she took her life 1 week before the first appointment. So, so these things are happening. This is the third lawsuit, but probably there are others, in progress. And it's just something to be aware of, right? As we are navigating as parents, as peers, for if you are, teenager yourself, thinking about these pieces. As mental health professionals, are we asking about these things in our visits? And by and large, I'll say for myself, I have not been asking because, I just, even though it's something that I'm aware of, it's sort of on the periphery of my awareness and I've got other things to do. But I'm going to start paying more attention as I'm seeing more of these headlines come up. So even though it seems frightening, and those are just a handful of examples of recent things that are occurring in our country, there are also some very positive pieces that can come from social media and some safe spaces that can be created. And we know that media does have the power to really shape youth perception, right, of ourselves, of our communities, finding people that we trust. I thought one of the interesting findings from the Asian American Foundation Youth Mental Health Survey was who is comfortable talking to their parents, right? And by and large, LGBTQ youth, are not as comfortable, right? And so where do they find safe spaces, right? And there might be other groups that may not be as comfortable, right? There's eloquent discussion during the youth panel about, well, what about language as a barrier, right? And what if your parent is not fluent in the same language that you're fluent in and you're upset about something? Both of you might struggle to communicate that, right? So how do you find some of those safe spaces? The other piece that I like about social media is that sometimes youth are given a binary or, very, very limited choice set about what you can become, right? So this is just a story from the Moth. It says, you get three things you're offered by your parents as a Chinese boy, being a lawyer, a doctor, or a failure, right? That piece. And, although you might chuckle at it, there's a lot of truth to that. I might add engineer. But, I think there's a question of, well, does that mean I could be a, mental health advocate? Does that mean I could be an actor, right? Does that mean that I could be an elected official, right? All these things that you might want to be, maybe they don't make that list, right? So you turn to social media to see who else looks like you, sounds like you, may have a similar last name, whatever it is, that might be doing some of those things, right? That you would love to do. You're just not hearing it from your family or your community, micro-community around yourself, right? So, before you write off social media, just think about some things that are possible, some positive things from there, right? So, just one of the easiest things if you're talking to a youth, or your own child or whatever, is just, who are you following, who are you connecting to, and just following that story, right? So it may not be who we are following, right? But you learn something from who they admire, right? Creativity, all sorts of examples of interesting things being sparked by things that kids see on YouTube, right? Or on other platforms. And that curiosity can lead them to new skills, right? And I think that is a powerful thing, right? Wherever you're at. Celebration also, what are you proud of, right? And several panelists today talked about not hearing that I'm proud of you or I love you from their parents, right? And, I think I could say that a little bit more, for my kids as well, right? But where are you getting your validation, right? Who is proud of you when you've done that thing, right? Who are you sharing with? Who are you tagging in your posts, right? I think that's an important piece. And then communication. If you've ever screwed up with posting something on social media, it's a hard platform, right? If you get the fury on social media, you'll learn. You'll learn from it. Hopefully, not in a career-ending way, but it is a harsh teacher. And so to learn to use that, actually, in a somewhat sadistic way, is teaching us different communication skills as well, because sometimes you learn some of those pieces. Now there's a very positive pieces as well, but it actually does take skill. It takes some executive function to say, well, I will post, or maybe I'll put this in my drafts folder, go to bed, and then think about it tomorrow morning, right? Those kind of pieces. So all those things are things you can learn just by chatting with people, right? Your kids, maybe your patients, other youth you're working with or mentoring. So curiosity, these are just a couple of things for my own kids. One kid, one of my twins, he learned how to do these Lego programming, stop motion kind of pieces. So he put a bowling video, which I will not subject you to during lunch. But if you've ever seen the Spider-Verse movie, there's also a scene there created by another boy who created a stop motion one with Lego Spider-Man. And it was so good that I think the studio found it and told him to create a segment in the movie. So there's some amazing things that kids can learn how to do online. This is a dish that my daughter Lucille over there did put together just learning from YouTube, which I was shocked by, frankly. But that's the new cookbook, right? You don't buy these walls of cookbooks anymore. It's all on YouTube. And many of our recipes, which our grandmothers, grandparents, parents may not have taught us, right? Sometimes you can find on there, or at least a variant of it as well. So thinking about how many of you are parents in this room? Can you raise your hands? Okay, that's great. How many of you are clinicians in this room? And how many are youth or young adults? Okay, all right. Well, so, I think that we all need different tips, right? As I mentioned earlier, nobody feels like an expert. All this stuff coming out of the AI, no one feels like an expert on, right? We're just kind of barely learning this stuff. So how can we try to equip youth that we work with at least a tip, something that we can do? I will also note that there's no respect for me at home. Just being a child psychiatrist, Lucille can affirm that, but just that does not carry any weight. So let me just tell you, we're all bumbling through this together. Those are my 4 kids. One thing I would suggest, although I find it interestingly divisive amongst my mental health colleagues, is be on social media yourself, right? Just say it again. We ask our youth to be safe on social media. We better be on social media. Otherwise, you don't understand what it's like, right? Now, I will say that the platforms that I am on are not necessarily the most youth-friendly, right? So I do also have lurked on other platforms, but these are the ones that I use mostly professionally. But there are parallels. We know they're mostly on TikTok, YouTube, Snap, Instagram, all those pieces. If you can bring yourself, try it out. At least lurk, which just means that you're not posting, but you're on, can see what's out there. So you understand what's out there. I think that if you take away one thing, that's the most important thing. But ask your kids what platforms they're on and see if they're honest with you. But that is the most important thing, so you know what you should be on and try to understand what the forces are there, right? So the other piece, I would just say is read the news. It is changing so fast. And these are just a couple things I pulled this week. This is a school that tried a software to flag things because they're concerned about unsafe things. But the software is imperfect, right? So it caught all sorts of art projects and people putting pictures that were not actually child pornography and flagged them and so on. We're all trying our best, but it's imperfect right now, right? We also know there's some organized child predation pieces. The FBI is warning about that, as he mentioned earlier as well. But keep that, keep reading whatever journals that you read, whatever websites you subscribe to for your news. Keep looking and watching those, and then talk about them. Even if your teen or tween or mentee is not particularly excited to talk to you about it, at least share it and see what their thoughts are about it. What perspectives they have. As I mentioned, for clinicians, just think about asking one question, right? And it could just be been reading a lot about AI lately or hearing a lot about AI. What are you hearing, or have you had any experience with that? We know that many youth are experimenting with AI companions. Not all of them are using them as therapists, but some of them are, right? And so you might ask them about that. What do you know about character AI? Have you tried any of these platforms out yet? What do you think? What has it been like? Get their experience, right? Social media, again, just be curious about the platforms. You cannot be an expert on all of them. None of us are. But they might be, and so you might be curious because they spend maybe 10 hours, 15, 20 hours a week on these platforms, right? What are they doing on there? Some of it might be very positive, right? I have a youth, that I've talked to recently who, puts music out there, original music that she writes, right? So, I think there's interesting positive things that you can do and then some really, really negative things that can happen. I've also had others that have met predators and been exploited. So, I think there's all sorts of possibilities. We know they're also asking about mental health online, right? So the very purpose of this conference. So, UCA Waves, it's super important that, as UCA keeps going forward with this outstanding Waves platform, we think about a social media presence. Do we have a hashtag that we're using, which I believe right now is hashtag UCA Waves, by the way. If you're posting any insights from the panelists, probably should be on Instagram, or you can make a TikTok video if you're youth, whatever it might be. Think about where the eyeballs are. And they're probably not on LinkedIn. I'm just going to put it out there. So that's not where the youth eyeballs are. So, we all know that some of the stuff out there is not accurate. And for the mental health clinicians out there, we're seeing more people coming in wondering about things that they saw on TikTok, right? So, I've had many requests from a youth that I've seen for years saying, I think I have autism. I did the check, saw this video, I did this checklist for ADHD, whatever it is. I'm convinced I have it. I need to do the testing, right? So, and it's interesting. Some also will, there's a lot of inaccurate claims. Some videos that are bashing cognitive behavioral therapy, which is a very evidence-based therapy, hard to find one with more evidence, right? Things like that. A lot of concerns about medications as well, right? Antidepressants and, just different myths about those as well. So, but do you know the accurate news, right? Are you getting it from Waves? Are you going to the APA? There's 2 APAs. Are you going to the social work group, wherever it is? But, do you have the accurate information so when things come up that you can have that conversation, right? As part of your rounding. Bad things will happen, right? And you hope it's a minor bump in the road. Just, gosh, shouldn't have posted that. Probably need to delete that. Might be something worse, right? Are you going to be there? And do you know kind of the landscape to say, well, this seems like a minor bump in the road. Let's talk about it. Let's, and maybe you want to, freeze your account on that platform, whatever it is, right? Or it might be like, well, gosh, you sent that photo. We don't know who that is, right? Maybe we should call the FBI, right? And actually, there is a website where you can report some of these cases because there have been so many sextortion cases targeting youth that it's become an international piece. So you need to know the difference, right? And need to kind of talk them through when something bad happens. Well, you know, this is just kind of a bump in the road, or this is a major high-risk activity here. We need to probably call in some experts. And if you're really worried, you know, talk to a therapist, you know. And I know that we have to balance because, you know, access was talked about several times, you know, by some of our keynote speakers earlier. We know we are not the best at getting people in. The wait list can be weeks, sometimes months to get people in, so it's not easy. Primary care can sometimes take some of it, although, you know, being married to a primary care provider, they don't always feel totally equipped to manage some of those pieces as well. But this is where we need safe spaces like Waves, where we can have these conferences, right, and discuss some of those things. So, again, this is the same kind of thing. We know that teens are increasingly confiding in them because they're easy, you know, and I think the word that this article shows is that they consider it native technology because so many are using it now, right? So, you know, well, you know, if I'm going to ask them how to do my math assignment or, you know, how to write this essay for college, I might as well ask them, you know, I'm feeling down, what should I do now, right? And increasingly, that is happening, and we need to make sure that, probably the mental health professionals are building the algorithms with the platforms, right? Or B, that, you know, if something happens, that we know how to check in and actually get people to care as well. So I think both of those things are still out there. And then always the regulatory agencies, the lawmakers, policymakers, we're always lagging behind because we are not the main users of these technologies, right? So just a few things, you know, as we're approaching the end of this piece, just to read about. And it's a couple years old now, but former Surgeon General put out a great toolkit on social media. I would encourage you to read it. It's probably like maybe less than 20 pages, but it's easy reading. And it's good because it has a page for like parents, has a page for youth, it's a page for policymakers, page for clinicians, right, on different recommendations. And they're very practical. I will say that they have not been accomplished since they were put out, I think in 23 or 24. So here's 6 recommendations for parents, right? You know, so just practically, you know, do you want to create a family media plan, right? Are you someone that has a highly structured household and you want to say, well, this is what we do. Here's our free zones where we don't have technology. Don't take it to your room upstairs, but you can use it on this main floor, whatever it is, right? Are you someone that cuts off Wi-Fi at, you know, 10 p.m. because you know the data that many kids are staying up late because of their smartphones, right? All those things. Different examples, you know, I think they are, generally great examples. And just thinking about that for your family would be helpful. Several of you might be policymakers in this room, right? And those of us that might not be still can influence policymakers by saying and calling our elected officials and saying, well, you know, here are some gaps that we see in social media. And I think you'd probably pencil in AI as well into this piece. But, you know, what are the protections for greater safety for children interacting with social media / AI, right? Or the technology, right? Whose responsibility is that? Are we comfortable when we see some of these bad outcomes happen that they're fixed? Are they just fixed in North Carolina? Are they also fixed way out in Nebraska, right? You know, how about California? Is it national? You know, and if it is national, how well is that enforced, right? You know, and so on. So I think all these things are interesting discussion for us. Requiring a higher standard of data privacy for children is a bigger thing as well. I mentioned deepfakes earlier. Unfortunately, now there's debate about whether you should post any photos of your kids online because they can now steal their identity using their facial features, right? You know, and unfortunately also create videos of them and doing very realistic things and so on. So, you know, we could each have a digital doppelganger just from having a photo posted online, you know, from this conference, right? And then someone can then use that. I saw this article about some clinicians who's found to their horror that some doppelganger themselves using AI was hawking some fake products using their likeness just from legitimate websites they had put up. So it can be done for celebrities, but it can also be done for your child. It can be done for you as a clinician. It can be done for you as a parent, right? All these things. So just who's looking out for those things. And the research is key. Somebody commented a little bit earlier just for the power of the being in the room and being told, well, there's no data. The Asian American community is doing fine, right? But now we have this outstanding report due to Dr. Chen, the Asian American Foundation, right, saying, well, we're not fine, right? There's a lot of specific areas of risk. We need to be aware of them. Policymakers need to think about that, and we need to invest in those things, right? So, again, these are areas that are not solved 3 years later. If you are highly structured, which I must admit I am not, in my approach to my kids, you could also use American Academy of Pediatrics has a media plan toolkit that you can go through, and it is highly, highly structured. So if you really want to walk through a contract and talk through all those things, that is a very good way to do it. And they have all sorts of things that you can kind of put in there and then really make sure you've covered all the bases, although I'm sure AI is not part of it yet. So, so that is something that you can consider as a second tool out there as well. Now, so last tool I'll just throw out there, and it sounds simple, but also important for why I'm going to try to give you some time to talk during lunch, is, family meals have been found to be very protective. And you think, well, that's ridiculous. But they've been found to be as protective or even more protective as youth sports, which also tend to be a very protective activity of people kind of working on a team together. Why is that? Because it creates a consistent space for dialogue. Now, we know the tension, including in my household, is whether we should watch Netflix while we're having this family dinner or actually talk to each other, right? It's constant. We don't always bat 100%, but it's a source of tension. And it doesn't have to be a dinner. It could be, breakfast, it could be whatever for your family. Even once a week can be something, right? But having a space where you talk about these things, and, you could try to, plan a couple of these articles, right? I saw this interesting article, about AI or whatever it is. I'm curious what you're doing, for social media, because I see your screen time report as you spend, 10 and a half hours a day on your phone. What are you doing on that phone, right? Those kind of things, but try to do it in a less, accusative manner. If you're stumped about what to talk about, one of my mentors, who I know about a couple of Dr. Chens here know as well as Dr. Ann Fischel, who is at Mass General, has this National Family Dinner Project. So she has all these cards that you can use to I don't quite know how to get the conversation flowing here, but I do believe in the power of family meal together. What can we talk about? And she does actually have some specific to social media as well, including an article just about, how do you talk to teens about that? So, going back to the old cucumber piece, right? So we would like to have our kids and then tweens and then teens in these safe spaces. By and large, they don't really exist, right? It's not like you graduate from, the dull knife to the medium dull knife to the sharp knife, right? When they're on Roblox, they might encounter a predator, disguised as a peer, right? At, 8 years old, right? When they're 15, they might be, scrolling and then find an ad for pills, right? Whatever it is. So it's not like you slowly work your way up. It's like you're in there now. And even if you're trying to ban them from smartphones and you have to give them a dumb phone or whatever it is, right? They're going to go to their friend's house, or they're going to be, or even at school, they'll be there waiting for cross country, and they'll be scrolling on their, friend's stuff. So you really can't prevent it. My advice is think about it where you walk alongside them, right? So some of you may have had the terrifying experience of teaching your kids how to drive, right? I've been through that. Both of my twins have had minor car accidents, I wasn't in the car during those times, but, it's one of those things where you don't just give them the keys, right? You try to go with them, and even though it's terrifying, some things happen, right? These knives are actually our youngest, trying to learn how to cook, going from dull knife, he's right now on the middle knife, right? All these things, they're hard things, but we got to do them because you cannot trust that the platforms will do it. By and large, the platforms are about maximizing attention span on the platform and then thus maximizing revenue, usually through ad, whatever it might be. So, and the legislators very much mean well, but they're usually about 2 to 5 years behind, if not longer, right, from actually what's happening on the streets or on this platform. So you have to be aware, right? And I think it's just some easy things, just have the conversations, read what's coming out in the news. And then, if you're a clinician, ask about it, right? And then just acknowledge we're all imperfect, right? There's some things that we'd love to do. We screw up ourselves. I've screwed up on social media, and had to delete some things. And it happens, right? And hopefully it's a bump in the road. If it's a bigger thing, be able to recognize that, triage what to do, and ask for help, right? So I think with that, I'm going to end my talk. Thank you very much. And I think we're all set for this portion. Do you want to? Thank you very much.